For more on the administration's response, I want to welcome on Paris Dennard, a Republican commentator and strategist. Paris, thank you very much for joining us tonight. The coronavirus is kind of the big news story in the news cycle. I mean, we've moved on from impeachment. It was Iran there for a little bit, and now this seems to be what people on both sides of the aisle are kind of focusing on right now. So you worked in the Bush administration. What is the White House doing right now to prepare for this outbreak?
Well, thank you for having me on the program. And I will tell you that this White House is fully prepared for handling the issue which is upon us, not only in our nation, but globally, which is the coronavirus. I was with the president yesterday in the Oval Office, as well as in the cabinet room for the Black History Month celebration. And he had a meeting with some distinguished Black American leaders, and I was honored to be there. But at that meeting, he took the time to address the issue of the coronavirus and what the White House and the entire administration is doing. And the president pointed out, as you pointed out, the report that says that the United States of America is the #1 most equipped and most ready and most capable country of dealing with this virus, dealing with pandemics like this. And so the president reassured all of us that were present, and the media that were present as well, that the administration is doing what they're supposed to do, coordination. And he's also very proud, and I support the president on this when it comes to quarantine. Look, we're in a pandemic mode right now, and all eyes are on trying to stop the spread of this virus. And the only way you can do that is by preventing those who are infected or potentially infected or exposed to it from getting to the United States of America. So he took the unprecedented step of shutting down the border to certain countries, and that was the right thing to do, to try to contain it, isolate it, so that the American people can be made safe, because that's what he's here to do, keep America safe and put America first.
How much discretion does the president have when making these type of arrangements, whether it be travel restrictions, whether it be more funding for research? Is it the president's decision as the commander-in-chief, or is there more congressional type of involvement than people may think?
Well, you know, I've had the privilege of working in legislative affairs in the Bush White House, and know all of the people who are working so wonderfully in the Trump administration, the Trump White House Legislative Affairs team. And I will tell you that the president's powers are limited when it comes to what can be done to stop a virus or a pandemic. You have to utilize all resources, which includes working with the Congress. That's why it's so important that the Democrats in Congress put partisanship aside and actually think about the American people, think about the world, and stop trying to make this into some race argument. I'm so sick and tired of people making everything about race. This is not about race. Closing the border to prevent a pandemic, a massive virus from coming to the country is not about race. It's about putting the safety and security and the health of American citizens first. And so the president and the administration has to work with the Congress, because when the president asks for $2.5 billion for the coronavirus, the Congress can appropriate more and authorize more. That was just what the administration said should be done based upon the assessments that they made. But it's up to the Congress to deal with the money and appropriate and authorize it. The president can't do it, but there are certain things that the president can do, which leads to coordination of government agencies like HHS and working with the Surgeon General and other agencies like the Department of Defense and Secretary of State's office. But when it comes down to the money and working with NGOs, coordination of that and making sure that things like the American Red Cross, programs like the American Red Cross are appropriately acting, that's what the administration can do. It's about coordination. It's also about making sure accurate information is going to the American people. We should not be turning to Senator Joe Biden or Klobuchar or Michael Bloomberg to get us details about the coronavirus. We should be looking to the CDC. And that's why the appointments that the president makes to his cabinet are so critically important. And he's made some very good appointments to the CDC as well as at HHS.
What is a reasoning for shutting down $2.5 billion to fight the coronavirus?
It's about politics. That's all this is about. When we look at go back to the shutdown of the government over the border wall and the border funding, that was all about politics, because most of those congressmen and senators who were against the border wall or funding for the border wall had supported it before, but it was only because President Trump wanted it that they then had a problem with it. They admitted that it was a crisis on the border before, but when President Trump calls it a crisis, all of a sudden it's racist and it's not a crisis. And so when you fast forward to the coronavirus and the president asks for $2.5 billion, now they're politicizing it because they don't want to give the president another win. Because if they go along with what the president says, it says, yes, we will appropriate and authorize $2.5 billion, that's saying, yes, President Trump, you are correct. Yes, President Trump, we think that's the right amount of money based upon the research and analysis that you have done from the administration standpoint to effectively aid in this combating the coronavirus, but they won't do that. So they're going to say it's inadequate, it's not enough, and it's racist because it's all about politics. We could have so many more accomplishments in this country for the American people in a time of supposed crisis, because I'm not sure that the coronavirus is at the level by which the mainstream media and the Democrats are trying to put it on that. I think that's also politics as well. But instead of doing that, they could come together, work with this administration, and get things done instead of trying to deal with this November election right now in February.
Is the coronavirus going to be a big issue going into 2020? I mean, we already see some of the Democrats talking about the economy tanking. We've heard them in the past say that they actually are almost hoping for a recession so they could use it against President Trump going into 2020. Is this going to be a big issue going into November?
I think the Democrats will try to make this a big issue going into November. But if you look back to the Ebola virus virtually had no impact on the American economy. It was something that was managed well, and the government at the time did a good job in dealing with the situation once it got to the U.S. And when you fast forward to this issue with the coronavirus, the Democrats are going to use it as a political issue because that's all they have. They can't talk about the economy with President Trump because the economy is fantastic. They can try to say he's a racist, but when you look at what he's doing for black Americans all across this country, whether it's opportunity zones or unprecedented support for HBCUs and criminal justice reform, that falls flat. You can't say that the president is not looking out for all the people of this country, because you can see that his policies, especially trying to drive down taxes and deregulation and doing all these positive things for the country, it doesn't work. Everything they try to say to tear this president down falls flat. And so now coronavirus pops up and they say, let's use this to try to show people that he's racist because he closed down the border and that he doesn't have the ability to function as a government because he only asked for $2.5 billion and they don't know what they're doing and they asked for it too late. That is a tactic. It's a political tactic. It's also, we know what happens? Fear. Fear drives people. And so I think they're trying to get Americans to be fearful of the government and fearful of the government response being inadequate, that this pandemic is coming. It very well may be something that gets here, but that's not where we are right now. You know for a fact the CDC says over 4,800 people have died from influenza this year alone. Over 80,000 infected. So right now in the U.S., the biggest concern should be influenza, not the coronavirus, but you don't see the Democrats up here talking about what the government is doing to combat influenza because they're playing on fear because that's all they have to do and that's all they have to go on, and it's unfortunate.
No, I think you're right, and I think it actually plays into the president's wheelhouse a little bit because it kind of comes back to a lot of things he ran on in 2016, saying that we need to have control over our borders, we have to have control over who's coming into this country. So if they do want to use this as a weapon against the president, which they very may well, as you pointed out, I think that there's also some obstacles and some hardships doing that, especially acknowledging what, for example, the frontrunner Senator Bernie Sanders has said about our borders as of recent memory. In fact, he's kind of flipped on the issue of immigration, but as of recently, he's been one of those guys calling for decriminalizing crossings and stuff like that. And I don't think that's what American people want to hear amid a coronavirus outbreak. But Paris Dennard, I really appreciate you coming on tonight and breaking down this complex issue. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.